It's been 2 weeks, but we're back here on Believe in White Sox. Not going to be a particularly long show today, but a couple of questions to ponder here. I'm Greg Moraz, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in to this morning's show. If you like what you see or what you hear and you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do that. Also, make sure that you tell your friends, all your White Sox fan friends, about the show so that we can upgrow this thing a little bit more. And, my lack of recording a show is not exactly helped this podcast grow in the last couple of weeks, but our numbers have started to do a little bit better, and I think that is in correlation to the fact that the White Sox are actually interesting. So the main topic of today's show is just quite simply, are the White Sox better than their record? And I know a lot of people will always say, well, your record is what it is, and you are what your record is, which is effectively to say, if you're the White Sox and you are 12 and 29, then that effectively means that you're as good as a 12 and 29 team. Now, before I went back to California, here's the series recaps of what we've had since I've been gone. The Sox lose 2 out of 3 to the Brewers, but they win 8-0 in their lone win in the series. Then in the Astros series, I actually go to the one game that they lose. They win 2 of 3. So the White Sox get their second series win of the year in their triumph over the Astros. Then the series that got a lot of pub, and it's because of what happened on Tuesday night with Chase Mydroth. They go to Kansas City, they lose all 4. 2 of those games being one-run losses, and one of those games, the 4-3 loss on last Tuesday, that's great English, Greg, was a game where Chase Mydroth dropped a pop-up. Not only dropped a pop-up, I'm sure that if you're a White Sox fan, you've seen the video, and if you're watching this or listening to this, you've definitely seen the video where a pop-up goes literally off of Chase Mydroth's head, and it ends up being the difference in the White Sox losing the game. And mistakes are going to happen for a young team, and stuff like that just happens in a baseball game. And Chase Mydroth has brought a new sense of hope to the middle infield position. I say middle infield position because he's played short and he's played second. So, for me, I'm not upset at that in the microcosm of I'm upset about it in the microcosm of the moment, but I'm not particularly upset at that, just given the fact that this White Sox team, they need some hope, and the positives for Chase Mydroth have been a whole lot better than the negatives. Now, he's already had some injury troubles, and that was stemming back to something from spring training. His average is at 246, but his on base is at 343. So his OBP is almost 100 points higher than his batting average, which means that he's doing a good job of getting on base, even if he's not always getting hits. Then the White Sox come home. They win 2 of 3 from the Marlins, including a 4-2 win yesterday with a 3-run homer on Mother's Day by Tim Elko. And I think that the final conclusion of the Tim Elko saga, in that he's finally with the White Sox, I think is going to make a lot of fans really happy. And it's going to make fans happy because of the fact that they've watched this guy in the minor leagues. And if you go to the White Sox Twitter account and you see Sergio Santos in the meeting calling him up to the big leagues, like, you can tell that this is a guy that the organization loves, that his teammates love, that everybody wants to succeed. And, 2 games into his big league career, Tim Elko has 1 hit, a home run. And again, small sample size. But the thing that it is encouraging is that of the 5 at-bats that he does not have a hit, he only has 1 strikeout. Maybe this lights a fire under Andrew Vaughn. The pitching has continued to be good. The starting pitching in particular has continued to be good. These are your ERAs for the regular White Sox starters, with most of them having gone 7 turns through the rotation. Shane Smith, 2.08 ERA. Davis Martin, 4.01. He's had some up and downs. Jonathan Cannon, 4.09. Sean Burke, who was terrible yesterday, but found a way to get through 5 innings, 4 innings or 5 innings, can't remember, 4.15. And right now, the White Sox have elected to go to Bryce Wilson as their fifth starter instead of trying to bullpen game it, which I think is a good idea. He's currently got an ERA of 4.88, and Bryce Wilson has starting experience in the past. So this is a team that at this point in the year, you're encouraged by what you've seen from your younger guys. You're encouraged extremely by, and granted, they don't really have a fifth starter, but their starting rotation has exceeded expectations. In modern baseball, if you've got four starters with an ERA of 4.2 or below, that's acceptable. To me, that's showing that you're a team that is going to go out and give yourself a chance to compete every single time from the pitching perspective of things. And the White Sox have the 12th best ERA in all of Major League Baseball. Like that is awesome. All right, maybe I had this sorted wrong. Yeah, I had it sorted wrong. So the White Sox at this point are 18th in the league in ERA. Still better than what most people expected that they were going to be. Worst team ERA, by the way, the Colorado Rockies. And oh boy, the Colorado Rockies are taking a lot of attention away from the White Sox. Even though they only have 5 fewer wins, they're 7-33. They're on pace at the moment to be worse than last year's White Sox. And I think that this White Sox team, again, the stat I go back to is one-run games. They are 2-10 in one-run games. For a team that's 12-29, if you make that, let's just say 9-3 in one-run games, that's 7 more wins. And instead of being 12-29, you're 19-22. That looks a whole hell of a lot better than 12-29. Now, I'm being a little bit optimistic in terms of how I view where this team is going in terms of how many wins they can stack up. But you now, especially with Tim Elko up, you've got the building blocks that you hope are going to be a significant part of your organization's future. At least that's the way that I would like to view it. Edgar Caro, through 20 games, has been awesome. He hasn't hit a homer yet, but he's hitting 274 with a 375 on base percentage. Lenyn Sosa is finally starting to show why people were so excited about him. Now, his average is only at 257. Here's the problem. Like, this team is hitting 214. This offense as a whole is terrible. I mean this in no offense, but I mean, Andrew Vaughn is hitting 191 with a 225 on base, and he's your team leader in RBI. Now, nobody on this team has more at bats than Andrew Vaughn. Andrew Vaughn has played in all but one game this year. Lenyn Sosa has played in every game this year. He's the only player on this White Sox team that has played in every game. Is that right? I'm trying to think about it. Am I doing the math right? No. That's no White Sox players played in every game. Andrew Vaughn's missed 2 games. Lenyn Sosa's missed 1 game. So, and again, injuries are also going to be an issue for this team because we haven't seen Corey Lee come back from the IL, and who knows if we're going to at some point see Corey Lee come back from the IL. Miguel Vargas has started to deal with injuries as well, which is unfortunate because he was really starting to swing a hot bat. He did not play in the final 2 games of the Marlins series, but he had hit safely in 4 of his last 6. Actually, it may have been a little back further than that, if I can do the math right on the game logs. But Miguel Vargas had started to pick it up significantly once we had hit late April and early May. So I hope that whatever he's dealing with is not a huge deal. And then Brooks Baldwin is proving he can play everywhere. I'd like to see the average a little bit higher than 226, but 3 homers, 16 runs batted in. He's been fine. So, and he gives you the versatility that you're so hoping for. And I like that there are guys on this team that I can see being part of this team during, and I've made this point many times before. It feels like I see guys that can be part of this team when they're good again. Like if you have an infield and a battery, and there are some guys that are not here yet, but imagine a lineup that has Tim Elko at first. You've got Chase Mydroth probably at second. Maybe Colson Montgomery ends up as your starting shortstop, but his struggles at AAA have been well pronounced. And right now, I don't feel like he's any part of this team's future. Third base, who knows? Then you've got a situation where Braden Montgomery at some point ends up part of your outfield. Maybe Kyle Teal ends up playing part of your outfield. You got Edgar Caro as one of your catchers. Brooks Baldwin can play everywhere. He's effectively going to be the modern day Leary Garcia, which, you know, people people love to hate on Leary Garcia, and I think that Tony La Russa beat a dead horse there, which is why we got tired of Leary Garcia. But at the same time, you cannot argue with the versatility. Oh, Miguel Vargas at third. I don't know why. I don't know why I was blanking on that. And Lenine Sosa maybe ends up at, so to kind of go back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, like you could, in theory, have an infield and a starting catcher. Edgar Caro, Tim Elko, Lenine Sosa, Chase Mydroth, and Miguel Vargas. That's a starting infield and catcher that I think a lot of people can get excited about. And if you have a chance to play those guys every single day together, now granted, all of the injuries that are cropping up with certain guys are making that unable to happen. But now that Tim Elko is here, I think he needs to be in the lineup every day, whether that be at first base or at DH. And what I'm hoping it does, if Tim Elko performs well, and I think a lot of people are expecting just based on what they say about the kid, I'd say I'm calling him a kid, he's not that much younger than me, but from what people say about him, I think that he could light a fire under Andrew Vaughn to start playing better. And if he does that, then Andrew Vaughn has trade value. Andrew Vaughn all of a sudden becomes a worthwhile ad for a team at the deadline. And look, at this point, Andrew Vaughn is a sunk cost. Organizationally, you have to chalk him up as a loss at this point because he's not getting better, he's getting worse. And you now have somebody that plays his same position that people are more excited about. And maybe there's a world where Andrew Vaughn and Tim Elko exist together on the same team with one as a DH and one as a first baseman. Maybe Andrew Vaughn goes back to rookie year Andrew Vaughn and learns to play the outfield again. I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe that ends up happening. But at this point, what I hope and what I think most White Sox fans hope is that Andrew Vaughn sees a motivation in what Tim Elko does and aids him to play better. And if he doesn't play better, then you're going to start to see the at-bats get taken away from him. And I think Will Venable, based on the lineup construction, is going to put out what he thinks is the best lineup every single day. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best lineup for the future of this team. He is a guy that wants to win as many games as possible. And of course, like nobody wouldn't be. Like no manager goes out there at the major league level and puts out a lineup for development. But if you have all these guys on the roster, you need to get them at bats. You need to play them every day together. What you have, it ain't working. What you've had has not worked. So now it's time to put in something different. That's where I feel like the White Sox are going to progress through this year and feel like, hey, we are a better team than our record because we have guys that are learning to play together and learning how to win together. I think that there's so much youth on this team that they have to learn how to win, and you have to learn how to win by playing together. Now, the outfield is a different story entirely because I don't think that any of this outfield will be here when this core is good again. I've been saying 2027 on past episodes. I'm willing to bump that to 2028 just because I feel like I don't see this team in the arc that they're going making that big of a jump in 2 years. Let's see how this year goes and then see what next year brings. And there may be, Bob Nightingale alluded to it in the article, and we'll get to it in a little bit, but, you know, Luis Robert could be on the move at some point, and that's going to end up meaning some form of return that you would hope gets you future major leaguers. So Luis Robert is in a position where I give up on him as being a part of this team's long term future. And Luis Robert is somebody that at this point in the year, like he's got 5 homers and 16 runs batted in, he's stolen 15 bases. I mean, to me, that is extremely impressive and is proving that in some aspects, he's exactly what the White Sox have always wanted him to be. And look, the track record of success for him in the past, we know how good he can be. Like the 2023 season where he hit 38 homers, he only hit 264, but we know how good he can be. 2021 and only 68 games due to injury, the year the Sox won the division, he hit 338. So staying healthy for him has been an issue in pretty much every year but his first year in 2020 during the COVID year and 2023, which was by far his best year in the bigs. Now, if you're looking at Luis Roberts' contract situation and you hope to see, as I didn't have it pulled up and I probably should have had it pulled up, you see what kind of contract he has and what type of value it's going to end up bringing on the open market. So, they have club options on Robert for each of the next 2 years. The club option is going to end up being at around $20 million. It's actually exactly according to Spot Track. It's going to be $20 million each of the next 2 years. He's making $15 million as a base this year. So he'll be 28 years old next year. And I just don't see, and for those of you that have followed this show for now the almost year that we've been doing it, which doesn't seem like we've been doing it that long, but we had periods of time where we just haven't done shows because, I mean, last year's team was so depressing to talk about at times. Like, I just doing shows kind of felt obligatory, and nobody wanted to listen because of the fact that nobody wanted to talk about that team. I hated talking about that team. So I think Luis Roberts in a situation where if a team needs a center fielder, not just this year, but in years moving forward, if you take 2 club options on him, that is a player that you're going to get for 2 years and $40 million next year, which I think is a pretty solid move. I think that that is a really good value on somebody that is athletically gifted and has the type of potential. And it's weird that we're talking about potential still in this his 6th year in the big leagues, but at times it's frustrating because a guy that's this good should not be hitting 186. Now, unlike Andrew Vaughn, who's hitting 191 with an on base of 225, at least his on base is 293. At least he's finding ways to draw walks. He's got 20 walks this season in 152 plate appearances. That's a lot better than in years past. Last year, he had 28 walks in 425 plate appearances. 2023, he had 30 walks in 595 plate appearances. So the plate discipline for him is getting better. Something with his coaching staff has clicked for him. But if he's not going to be, and I think a lot of people thought that he was going to get traded before this year started. And I think it goes back to my theory on Vaughn in terms of why Vaughn wasn't traded, that there wasn't much value compared to what the White Sox felt like they should be able to get for somebody of that talent in return. The way that I see the trade deadline going for the White Sox is quite simply this. Chris Getz on guys that are signed past this year will not trade a guy unless he feels like he can get the peak value for him. And that's where I feel like if Luis Robert goes into August or it's July 27th and he's still hitting 186, I think that Luis Robert Jr. remains with the White Sox, not just till the end of 2025, but at least till the deadline in 2026. I think he's too valuable an asset to not pick up that club option. But if you don't actually want to pick up that club option, then you have to trade him now. Like now. And kind of the same with Andrew Vaughn, because next year is his final year of arbitration, and that'll be an unrestricted free agent after the 2026 season per Spot Track. And this year he's making $5.8 million. So you have him under contract for at least another year. And again, with him having one RBO remaining, there's value in picking up a guy that has more years left on his contract. So I think that he will have to play his value up a little bit more. But again, we've got to go into mind of Chris Getz, and we have to understand how the White Sox operate financially, and Jerry Reinsdorf being as cheap of an individual as he is it worth paying a guy $20 million for one season that you don't necessarily have to pay, but he's not going to help you win for the money that you're paying him? Effectively, at least the way that most rational people would view it, you pick up his club option, you do that so that you can trade him. You don't do that because he's going to be an important part of your team. No, he's going to fill a roster spot at that point. And even if he has a great year, one great year, a year of, let's just go back to his 2023 year, like a year of 38 homers and 80 RBI is not going to turn this team into a contender. It's just not. So you have to be able to send him to a place that has assets that are under control for a long time that can turn into, hopefully, future big league outfielders. It's a delicate tightrope to walk with him. But if you can, and I think that at this point, the White Sox are extremely happy with the return that they got in the Garrett Crochet deal. Because I think that Braden Montgomery is going to end up being a big league outfielder at some point before the end of 2026 because he has played that well. We've already seen the benefits of Chase Meidroth. And I think you're going to see Kyle Teal in the big leagues before the end of 2025. What the Crochet deal has shown you is that if you evaluate and scout the right guys, if you scout the right prospects in another team's system, you can get value that you may not otherwise have seen. That trade to me is the blueprint of what a great scouting department can do. And so any offer that comes to the White Sox for Luis Robert Jr., And I think that you have a better chance with him than you do with Andrew Vaughn of finding a trade partner that's going to be willing to give up certain pieces. If you look at teams around the American League, who are teams that you would think are going to be willing to add somebody to help? I look at the Houston Astros. I look at the Sacramento A's. I look at the Texas Rangers. In some aspects, I look at the Seattle Mariners. I look at the American League West and I see a bad division with 4 different teams that at this point can all win it. That's a division where you can scout the minor league systems and figure out who you want. Because in a race that tight, adding somebody like Luis Robert Jr. to your outfield could end up being the difference in you making the playoffs or not. In the American League East, maybe the Blue Jays. Maybe you do another deal with the Red Sox, although at this point, I don't think you can do another deal with the Red Sox because you've already gone through their minors and gotten the guys that you got for somebody that's a higher value piece than Luis Robert Jr. So whatever return you're going to get is not going to be as good as Mydroth, Teal, and Montgomery. You look in the National League, they're talking about talks with the Mets. I think there's a very strong case that you could see Luis Robert Jr. in a Mets uniform. I think there's a case to see Luis Robert Jr. in a Cardinal uniform. I would even think, and I say this as somebody that, I grew up in the Bay Area and I go to a lot of Giants games. Like, I could see him in a Giants uniform. I could see him if they get desperate because of the amount of money that they spent and they need something to infuse their team. I could see him in a Diamondbacks uniform. But it all depends upon what's the right trade, and there does not need to be an urgency to trade him right away. But at the same time, if you don't trade him, you've got to hang on to him as long as you can and get something for him. I'd rather pay the $20 million to be able to trade him for something than save the $20 million and never get anything for him. That's what I feel. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm right, and a lot of people are going to have different opinions on that. But I think that at this point, the executive decision organizationally is that when this team is good, Luis Robert's not here. But Luis Robert has to be valuable enough to get back people that could be here for a long time. And that comes on your scouting, and that's why Shane Smith, I think, is the shining example of what great scouting can do. So trust your scouts, trust your intuition, hope that he plays himself back into a player that people will give up more for than they will right now. And on that note, we look ahead this week. White Sox are in Cincinnati for 3 games starting tonight. It'll be 2 night games and a day game, then back to Chicago for a 3-game series up at Wrigley in the first battle of the Crosstown Cup against those pesky Chicago Cubs. 121st pitch starts Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then the White Sox will have a 6-game homestand against a pair of teams from the American League West. The Seattle Mariners Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. And the Rangers Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's it. That's all. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Believe in White Sox on the Believe Podcast Network.